Daily Broadside, day 564. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Paul McCartney's sex life. So this morning I was listening to Wings and got to thinking about Paul McCartney. And I was like, man, is he still married to that woman that has like one leg? And then I learned that he's on his third marriage to somebody else. And then I got to thinking, I was like, he's had sex numerous times with somebody with one leg, you know. And a little backstory. He's married to Linda McCartney. That was his main squeeze back in the day. She dies of breast cancer. I want to say they'd already separated, but maybe they hadn't. I don't know. But she dies. Then he moves on to this lady named Heather Mills. Now, an aside real quick, if I could, voir dire. Heather Mills, I couldn't remember her name. I just knew he had, a marriage with a lady with half a leg or one leg or something. So I went to Wikipedia to look it up, right? And I thought immediately, I was like, wait a minute. Don't just type in Paul McCartney. You'll find his wife like that. I was like, let's make this a challenge. So I had this epiphany of a new game, kind of a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Except it was Paul McCartney. And so I was like, all right, pick an obscure movie, right? I'm on Wikipedia, right? So everything's blue that you can hyperlink and just click to and all this stuff, right? So I was like, all right. So the first thing popped in my head was Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels. Great film by Guy Ritchie. So I go to the Wikipedia of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and I'm like, all right, I got to find Paul McCartney's wife. And so I'm like, all right, I have no idea how this is going to work, but I feel like I can do this, right? So I go through and immediately I'm like, oh yes, Sting was in this movie. So I click on Sting, knowing that it'll take me to the police. And I'm like, oh, there it is, the police. And then I go to the police and it says the police is a rock and roll band. And I click on rock and roll, knowing that it's going to take me to some kind of British invasion or whatever. And sure enough, it takes me to a list of, the history of rock and roll. I go to the British invasion section and who's there? The Beatles. Who played for the Beatles? Paul McCartney. Bob's your uncle, right? So I click on Paul McCartney and bam, Heather Mills pulls right up. So if you're ever in an airport and you need something to do that's, kind of dumb, just do 6 degrees of Wikipedia, right? I don't know if I invented that or if somebody's already thought of this, but it is a challenging little game, especially if you did it with a partner. You'd be like, all right, take Fatal Attraction and link it to Kevin Costner. I have no idea how long that would take, but it would be fun to do, right? If anybody's already come up with this game, I apologize. I know nothing about your life. Anyway, so Heather Mills, she lost her leg to, she was a model, whatever, and she gets hit by a police motorcycle who's responding to a call, and she gets clipped, I think, as a pedestrian, and she loses her leg, I want to say at the shin, right? And then later on, I think they have to take more of it off. Maybe, I don't know if she's lost it all the way up to the hip bone or whatever, but she's lost a significant portion of her leg by the time she's, however old, right? Then McCartney comes into her life somehow and they get married, right? So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, I've never had sex with a woman who had, was missing some kind of, arm or leg. It's not something that's come in front of me. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying I've never had the occasion. And I thought to myself, I'm like, wonder what that's like, because obviously there's some physical limitations, by virtue of what you can and can't do because you've only got one leg, you can only lean in certain positions and, boost yourself up and all that guy. And the guy might have to do a little bit more work in certain situations. I think you're picking up what I'm putting down. And I was like, it'd be intriguing. And it reminds me of a comedy routine that Damon Wayans did back in the day where he was talking about, I don't remember what the routine was, but he was talking about if his wife lost both her legs or something like that, and he'd be spinning her like a top, and it was a pretty good routine. He was a really monster stand-up comedian in the early 90s or whenever it was. But anyway, so I'm like, man, I wonder what it was like for Sir Paul McCartney back in the day where he's with Linda McCartney. He's had sex with her a million times. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's just, laissez-faire, whatever. But let's say it's just, above average, okay? And then he gets with Heather, and he's like, one of two things is going to happen. He's going to be like, God. He's calling up his friend. He's like, hey, mate. And he's talking about how, one-legged sex is that's the greatest thing ever. He's like, she can do so many cool things and, all this kind of stuff, and the view is different and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's great, maybe it's not. I don't know. But it's kind of and then he gets divorced from her, and then he's with this, I think, a current wife now. And she's assuming she has two legs. I'm pretty sure it's a safe bet she's got two legs. And, you know, now he's back to having sex with somebody with 2 legs. So he can do things, you know, a little bit easier. She can help, you know, facilitate some things a little bit easier. She doesn't have to, like, lean on one side and all that stuff. Because you'd think, like, you'd get dysplasia if you had a lot of sex with one leg. Because, you know, in certain positions, you'd be, you know, leaning towards it. But anyway, it makes me wonder, like, was Paul like, man, I had this 4-cylinder car back in the day. And, you know, it got me where I needed to go, if you know what I'm saying. We arrived at the destination, but it just, I mean, it got good mileage, but it just didn't have the power. You know, I wanted to pass on the highway. It just wasn't there, right? You know, and I don't always want 40 miles to the gallon. Sometimes I just want some torque and just, you know, pass by somebody. Then I got rid of that car, and I stepped up to a V8. And I got this nice V8, you know, car, and it had all this grunt and power. It sounded mean and everything, and it was awesome. It got me where I was going way faster, if you know what I'm saying. And then I got rid of that, and then for what I made a bad decision or whatever, you know, I regret, I lament. And then I went back to a 4-cylinder, you know, whatever. See, the 4-cylinder could be the lady with 2 legs, and the V8, obviously. I think you're picking up what I'm putting down. But maybe it was the other way around. Maybe he's like, man, I had this V8, and it was just this big, heavy car. It had some torque, but it drank gas. It just got crappy mileage. But then I got rid of the V8. You know, it died of breast cancer. And then I went and got like this 4-cylinder, like WRX STI, and it got great power and great mileage all in one. It, you know, had a blow-off valve and just, you know, just sounded great. But then I made a dumb mistake and I got rid of it. I don't know what the situation was, but I think you can kind of assimilate what I'm trying to say. But I don't know, man. I think that more people should embrace. I have a feeling. This is just me talking. I have a feeling that most people would look at what do you call them? People with like prosthetics and whatnot, and be like, I don't want to have sex with a prosthetic girl or a guy, whatever, you know, whatever your persuasion is. But I feel like we're missing out because I don't know what percentage of the population is with appendages that are missing and have prosthetics. I'm going to go out on a limb and go out on a limb. I didn't even mean to do that. I apologize, people that don't have limbs. That was kind of disrespectful. I really didn't mean to say that. But I'm going to go out on a guess and say it's probably like 1% to 2%, right? I mean, you don't go out very often. Of course, you do with the Iraq war situation, Afghanistan for the last 2 decades or whatever we've been doing. There have been a lot more people that have lost limbs. Needlessly, might I add, because none of those things needed to happen. But our politicians are more important, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, I'm going to say 1% to 2%, right? So 1% to 2% is not a grave amount of people. And the chances of you falling into some kind of relational situation whereby you could have sex with somebody and kind of get into Paul McCartney's head and be like, hey, this is something solid. I had no idea what kind of hidden gem we got going on here. You know, more people should have less legs or something like that. I don't know. I'm just saying. All this came from listening to a little Wings this morning. Maybe I'm amazed at the way you love me all the time. And he's not even singing about Linda, right? Or he's not even singing about Heather. He's singing about Linda. What if he'd have written that song later on? You know, maybe I'm amazed that I wrote that song back in the 70s because had I really known what one leg would really do, I don't know. I think I lost the melody there, but anyway, it's just something to ponder. Something to think about. You know, I don't mean to poke fun at people with one leg or one arm. I can completely sympathize with them for sure. But maybe there is that one like silver lining that makes it all right. And that's in the bedroom with Sir Paul McCartney, who's 81, who probably hasn't had sex in a couple of years. I don't know what year you stop having sex, but 81's got to be pushing it. Hey, giddy.